My friends, we are living in a moment unlike any other. The world is trembling. The nations are shaking. And the signs that were once distant are now standing at our very doorstep. In the deep night, when all voices were silent and no sound could be heard but the whisper of the Spirit, I was given a dream, a warning, a revelation concerning the final moments before the great catching away. In the dream, I stood upon a high place overlooking a world quivering like a candle in the wind. The sky above grew dim, not with darkness alone, but with a sense of divine imminence. And then I saw it, the last sign, the final harbinger before the moment when the trumpet will sound. It was not a symbol crafted by human hands. It was not the noise of governments, nor the rise and fall of empires. It was something deeper, something ancient, something woven into the very fabric of Scripture itself. It was the alignment of events, spiritual, moral, global, converging like rivers meeting at the sea. It was the sign of a world that had crossed a threshold, a world that had turned its face away from its maker. In the dream, I heard a voice, still yet shaking the chambers of my soul. The voice said, "What you see is the final call. Prepare, for the hour is nearer than you know." And suddenly the world beneath me trembled, not with terror, but with anticipation, as though creation itself was standing at the edge of its own transformation. I saw people distracted, asleep, chasing the dust of the earth while the heavens were opening above them. I saw others awakened, their eyes lifted upward, their hearts burning with expectation. Then the scene changed. I saw a great light descending, not a light of earthly fire, but the radiance of the coming King. And the earth responded, every shadow fleeing, every heart exposed, every soul confronted with the weight of eternity. My friends, the dream was not a message of fear. It was a summons, a call to awaken, a call to return, a call to stand ready, for the promise of the blessed hope draws near. The Spirit is sounding the alarm. The signs are aligning. The final moments are upon us. Do not be caught in the slumber of the age. Do not let your lamp burn out. Do not let the world dull your hearing. For the one who said, "I come quickly," has not forgotten his word. And when the trumpet sounds, it will be sudden, swift, glorious, unstoppable. So I proclaim to you now, the last rapture sign is not simply something seen with the eyes. It is something discerned with the Spirit. It is the convergence of prophecy. It is the shaking of nations. It is the awakening of the remnant. It is the drawing near of the King. Prepare your heart, lift your eyes, for the hour is late, and the bridegroom is coming. The world is entering a prophetic moment unlike anything witnessed in living memory. A moment that feels as though history itself is being drawn toward a center point, a convergence, a culmination. Across the earth there is a deep trembling, not only in the physical realm, but in the spiritual landscape that underlies everything seen and unseen. Nations are shifting, foundations are eroding, and the moral compass of society is spinning without true north. What was once considered unthinkable has become common, and what was once honored is now dismissed. It is as though an ancient pattern has resurfaced, a pattern spoken of long ago in Scripture, now unfolding before our very eyes. There is a sense that what is happening is not random. The events shaking our world are not disconnected accidents, but pieces of a larger tapestry, threads woven with intention. When we look at the world through a purely natural lens, everything appears chaotic. But when viewed through a prophetic lens, the chaos forms a picture, a warning, and a revelation. It is the sense that time is accelerating, that the pace of events is quickening, as though creation itself is being pushed toward a decisive hour. The signs written in ancient prophecies, signs of upheaval, lawlessness, deception, and spiritual famine, are no longer distant possibilities, but present realities. This prophetic moment is marked not only by what is happening in the nations, but by what is happening in the hearts of people. There is a divide growing wider each day. Some are drifting deeper into darkness, confusion, and spiritual slumber, numbed by distractions and overwhelmed by the noise of the age. Others are awakening, sensing that something is stirring in the heavens, something that calls for attention and preparation. This division is itself a sign, For Scripture speaks of a separating, a sifting, a revealing of what lies within the soul as the day approaches. The world shaking serves as a trumpet, a call from eternity breaking into time. Every earthquake of morality, every rising conflict, every intensifying shadow of fear becomes a reminder that the world does not stand on its own. It was created with purpose, guided with purpose, and it moves toward its appointed destiny. When nations rage, when systems collapse, when truth is abandoned and deception celebrated, it points to a moment when the world stands on the threshold of change. It is in this atmosphere that the ancient words gain new life. Watch, be alert, for the hour comes swiftly. Even those who do not know prophecy can feel it. Many sense that something is not right, that the world is shifting in ways that cannot be undone. They may not describe it in biblical terms, but they can feel the weight of the age, the tension of something approaching. Meanwhile, those who discern the times recognize these events as harbingers. The conflicts, the moral unraveling, the spiritual coldness, the global uncertainty, all these point to a prophetic rhythm, a countdown set long before our days began. The prophetic moment we are living in is not meant to inspire fear, but awakening. It signals that time is precious, that complacency is dangerous, and that the window for preparation is not endless. The world is sounding an alarm, echoing the call of Scripture. Return, awaken, restore your focus, rekindle your fire. For when prophecy begins to unfold, not in isolated signs, but in a sweeping convergence, it announces that the great moments of God's plan are drawing near. The world is not simply troubled. It is being aligned. It is not simply changing. It is being readied. And those who have eyes to see understand that this convergence marks the approach of a divine appointment, the unfolding of a chapter written long before the foundations of the earth. In the dark stillness of the night, when every noise fades and the world grows quiet, there are moments when the veil between the natural and the divine feels thinner than ever. It was in such a moment that the warning came, not through thunder, not through a visible sign in the sky, but through a dream unlike ordinary dreams, one that does not pass away with the morning light. This one carried weight, authority, and a sense of holy urgency. There was nothing random about it. From the first instant, it was clear that this dream was not born from the mind, but delivered from beyond it. Dreams throughout Scripture have often served as vessels of revelation. From Joseph in Egypt to Daniel in Babylon, the Almighty has spoken in the night seasons to reveal what was hidden from the eyes of the waking world. And so it was with the dream that unfolded. It began with a sense of stillness, an unnatural stillness, as though the entire world had paused, holding its breath for something yet to be revealed. I found myself standing in a place I did not recognize. And yet it felt familiar, as though I had been summoned there for a purpose. The air around me was heavy with significance. I sensed that what I was about to witness was not merely symbolic, but connected to something imminent. Then, as though the heavens themselves parted, a warning began to take form, not spoken in words at first, but felt, like a tremor in the soul. Slowly, the scene grew clearer. I began to see the world as though from above. Nations spread out before me, cities pulsing with light, people moving about, unaware of the spiritual tension rising around them. It was a picture of humanity living on the edge of a precipice without realizing it. As I stood watching, a voice broke into the silence. It was not loud, but it carried a power greater than sound. It spoke to the inner being, bypassing thought and striking directly to the core. The voice said that the moment approaching would come without warning, that the world was entering the final stretch before an event that would change everything. It spoke of readiness, of vigilance, of a separation that would unfold in an instant. The words were not given to provoke fear, but to wars, and rumors of wars grew more frequent and intense, like tremors before an earthquake. Nations rose against nations, not only with weapons, but with ideologies, words, and deceptions that shook the foundations of truth. Moral lines blurred, then vanished. What previous generations could hardly imagine became celebrated, promoted, and protected. The conscience of society weakened until it could no longer distinguish light from darkness. Yet this was only part of the convergence. Another stream came from within the spiritual realm, a growing coldness, a loss of reverence, a distancing from the sacred. Places that once held the fire of devotion became lukewarm. Many who once walked with clarity found themselves drifting, not because they rejected truth, but because they were slowly lulled into distraction. Spiritual slumber crept in like a fog, subtle and unnoticed, until hearts that once burned brightly now flickered faintly. But even this decline was part of the sign, for the writings of old spoke of a falling away, a cooling of love, an abandonment of what was once treasured. There was also the rise of deception, another stream feeding into the convergence. Not just deception in the world, but deception woven into ideas, movements, and voices that claimed authority. Confusion increased as people struggled to discern what was true. Real and false, authentic and counterfeit, holy and unholy became intertwined in ways that caused many to stumble. This too was prophesied, and now it was unfolding with alarming clarity. In the dream, these streams came together before my eyes. They moved with force, drawn toward a single point in time. It was as if the world itself was being pulled into alignment with a heavenly timetable, one that had been set long before any person walked the earth. The final sign was not something seen with physical eyes, but perceived with spiritual understanding. The world had reached the moment when the prophetic patterns of Scripture lined up with the condition of humanity. This alignment was not accidental. It was deliberate, precise, and unmistakable. Everything that had been written, everything foretold by the prophets, everything spoken by the one who knows the end from the beginning was now gathering into a single hour. It was the hour of convergence, the precursor to the moment when the trumpet would sound and the world would be changed in an instant. In the dream, I saw that this sign was not given to frighten, but to awaken. It was the last call, the final whisper before the shout. It was a reminder that the spiritual realm moves with purpose, that the hand of the Almighty guides history toward its appointed end, and that no event unfolds without meaning. This convergence was the final signal that the door was about to close, that the moment of gathering was nearer than ever before. And as I watched the streams merge into one, a knowing settled deep within. The last sign had come, not as a spectacle, but as a fulfillment of prophecy, quiet to the world, but unmistakable to those who discern the times. In the dream, the trembling of the earth was unlike any ordinary shaking. It was not the violent quaking of tectonic plates or the cracking of mountains. It was something deeper, something that felt as though it rose from the very core of creation itself. It was a trembling of anticipation, as if the world was aware of what humanity had forgotten. Every grain of soil, every breath of wind, every shifting shadow felt alive with expectation, waiting for a moment that had been spoken of since the beginning of time. It was as though creation knew the hour better than the people walking upon it. This trembling was not a trembling of fear, nor of destruction, but of readiness. It was similar to the way the air changes just before a storm breaks. The tension, the charged atmosphere, the stillness before the thunder rolls. Creation seemed to understand that something monumental was drawing near, something that would alter the fabric of existence. The scene around me carried this awareness. The sky appeared heavier, as though pregnant with revelation. The ground beneath my feet pulsed with a quiet urgency, and the air around me felt as though it held a message waiting to be spoken. I looked upon the world laid out in the dream and saw people going about their lives, busy, distracted, weighed down by routines, unaware that the earth beneath them was stirring with prophetic significance. It wasn't that they were deliberately ignoring the signs. Rather, they were so immersed in the temporary, the immediate, that they could not feel the spiritual tremors echoing through creation. They walked with eyes fixed on the ground while the heavens above them were preparing to open, but not everyone was unaware. Among the great masses of humanity, a remnant stood with lifted eyes and awakened hearts. These were the ones who sensed the trembling, not with their bodies, but with their spirits. Their hearts were attuned to the movements of heaven like finely tuned instruments responding to the faintest shift. They knew that creation does not tremble without reason. They recognized the signs for what they were, harbingers of the coming transformation. In the dream, I saw these awakened ones standing in fields, on mountains, in cities, in small hidden places, wherever life had placed them, each one illuminated not by the world's lights, but by a quiet glow of expectancy. They were not anxious, but ready. They were not fearful, but watchful. They understood that the trembling of the earth was a signal that the promise spoken long ago was nearing fulfillment. And as I watched, the trembling grew stronger, not with violence, but with certainty. It was as though creation itself was stretching upward, rising toward the moment when the King would break into the world with glory. The trembling carried the weight of prophecy, the echo of footsteps approaching, the whisper of a trumpet yet to sound. Scripture speaks of creation groaning, waiting for redemption, waiting for the unveiling. In the dream, that groaning was no longer distant. It had reached its crescendo. Creation was no longer simply waiting. It was on the verge of rejoicing. The world around me shimmered with a sense of divine imminence. The mountains seemed to lean forward. The trees seemed to sway with purpose. Even the horizon appeared sharpened, as though anticipating the arrival of something beyond human comprehension. This anticipation was not the anticipation of dread, but the anticipation of fulfillment. It was the sense that a long-awaited promise, a promise sealed by the one who cannot lie, was about to break forth. And then it became clear creation was responding to the nearness of the moment humanity had been told about since ancient days. The trembling was the earth's acknowledgement that the great gathering, the catching away, was at hand. What human eyes could not yet see, creation could feel. The world itself bore witness that the appointed time was approaching, and everything in existence was standing at the edge of that revelation. The call to wake up and prepare did not come with the roaring of thunder or the shaking of mountains. It came like a whisper, quiet, persistent, unmistakable, yet powerful enough to stir the deepest parts of the soul. In the dream, this call was not spoken through human language, yet its meaning was perfectly clear. It was the realization that many had fallen into a spiritual sleep, not out of rebellion or rejection, but through slow distraction. The noise of the age, the constant movement of life, the comforts and pressures of the world had lulled countless hearts into complacency. The signs were around them. The trembling of creation was beneath them, yet many walked unaware. This spiritual sleep was subtle. It did not look like outright darkness. It looked like busyness. It looked like routine. It looked like a life filled with responsibilities but empty of anticipation. People were not rejecting the truth. They were simply not paying attention. The glow of their first love had dimmed, not extinguished by rebellion, but slowly suffocated by the weight of daily concerns. And yet, the call of the Spirit in the dream was clear. Awaken. Wake up from this slumber, for the hour is nearer than the world realizes. The dream showed that the danger of this sleep was not merely in ignorance. It was in timing. A person who sleeps through ordinary moments loses nothing significant. But a person who sleeps through a defining moment loses everything. The catching away, the moment of transformation, would come suddenly without announcement, like lightning splitting the sky. The call to awaken was not given to inject fear, but to rescue those drifting on the quiet currents of distraction. It was a call of mercy, urging hearts to return to watchfulness before the moment arrived. In contrast to the slumbering multitudes, there were those in the dream who responded to the call. Their hearts were alert, their spirits attentive. They lived with an inner awareness, a sense that at any moment the heavens could break open. These were the ones who watched, not with anxious eyes, but with hope-filled expectation. They were not perfect people, nor were they without struggles, yet their lamps still burned. Their hearts were still aligned with the movements of heaven. They chose to remain awake while others drifted into sleep. This awakening did not manifest in dramatic displays. It showed up in ordinary choices, choosing prayer over distraction, choosing purity over compromise, choosing truth over convenience, choosing the eternal over the temporary. These awakened ones walked through the same world as everyone else, but they moved with purpose, knowing that time was precious. They understood that preparation was not about storing physical things, but about aligning the heart, sharpening the spirit, and maintaining a posture of readiness. In the dream, the call to prepare felt urgent, yet tender. It was not the voice of condemnation, but the voice of a shepherd calling scattered sheep back to safety. It reminded me that preparation is not about fear, but about love. Love for the one who is coming, love for the promise that awaits, love for the souls around us who still need to awaken. The call to prepare was an invitation to return to what matters most, to rekindle the flame that had grown faint, and to stand ready for the moment that would change everything. The vision made it clear that the dividing line in the final moments would not be drawn between the religious and the non-religious, or between those with knowledge and those without. It would be drawn between those who were awake and those who were asleep. The difference would not be found in outward appearance, but in inward posture. One group would be caught off guard, overwhelmed by a moment they never expected. The other would lift their heads, knowing that the promise had finally arrived, and so the dream's message echoed with unmistakable clarity: awaken, prepare, stay watchful, for the moment draws near. The call is not to fear the coming hour, but to be ready to meet it with joy, expectation, and unwavering devotion. For those who are awake, the moment will not be a shock. It will be the fulfillment of the hope they have carried in their hearts all along. The nearness of the king's return in the dream was not presented as a distant possibility or a symbolic concept. It felt immediate, so close that the air itself seemed charged with his approaching presence. There was a sense that history was tightening, like the final turn of a key in a lock, preparing to release a moment long spoken of, yet not fully understood. In the dream, time felt fragile, as though one more breath, one more heartbeat could usher in the transition between the seen and the unseen. It was the awareness that the great promise made through the ages was not merely approaching, it was right at the threshold. What struck me most was how quietly the nearness of his coming approached. There were no armies marching, no banners waving, no worldly signs announcing his arrival. Instead, it came with a quiet certainty, like the rising of dawn long before the first ray of light touches the horizon. Despite this quietness, there was also an unstoppable force behind it. Once the moment arrived, nothing on earth or in creation could delay it, alter it, or resist it. It would happen exactly as promised, with perfect precision. In the dream, this imminence brought a clarity unlike anything I had experienced before. It made everything else, every distraction, every argument, every pursuit, appear small, not unimportant, but fleeting, temporary, unable to stand in the shadow of eternal truth. The return of the King revealed what truly mattered: the state of the heart, the posture of the soul, the readiness of one's life. It exposed the urgency that so many had forgotten, reminding me that the world can grow loud and chaotic, but heaven's timeline never shifts. This awareness did not produce fear. Instead, it produced a deep sense of longing, a yearning to be aligned, awake, and fully prepared. The dream made it clear that the King's return was not only imminent, but also beautiful, glorious beyond description. Even without seeing him fully, I could feel the radiance of his presence drawing near. It was as though every shadow retreated, every falsehood was exposed, and every heart was laid bare in the light of his truth. The world was not ready for such revelation, yet creation longed for it. The dream revealed that many people, even those who believed in the promise, had allowed the press of life to dull their awareness of his nearness. They knew the teaching, they knew the prophecy, but they had lost the expectancy. Their hearts had grown accustomed to delay, forgetting that sudden moments are the pattern of divine intervention. Just as the flood came suddenly in Noah's day and the fire came suddenly in Lot's day, so too would the great gathering come suddenly in the final day. The dream reminded me that preparation is not about knowing the exact moment. It is about living every moment as though the King could appear at any time. For others in the dream, the nearness of his return was not a threat, but a hope. Their eyes were lifted, their hearts burned with a deep desire to see him. They carried within them a readiness that came not from fear but from love. Love for the one who promised to return. Love for the truth that would finally be fulfilled. These were the ones who understood that the king's return was not the end of hope, but the beginning of everything promised. They lived with the understanding that this world, with all its trials and turmoil, was temporary, and that the arrival of the king would bring clarity, justice, and everlasting joy. What stood out most in the dream was how the return of the king revealed the true condition of every heart. Those who lived for the world clung to what they could not keep. Those who lived for the king reached for what they could not lose. The nearness of his coming drew a line, not between good and bad people, but between those who were ready and those who were not. Between those who lived with eternal vision and those who lived with earthly distractions. And as the dream drew toward its end, the message became unmistakably clear. The return of the king is not distant. It is not theoretical. It is not symbolic. It is imminent. It is approaching swiftly, quietly, and with absolute certainty. This truth was not given to frighten, but to awaken, not to burden, but to prepare, not to overwhelm, but to anchor the soul in hope. For when the king returns, everything broken will be mended, everything hidden will be revealed, and everything promised will be fulfilled.